Good day, my friends. Pwalpar here. Got out there and blowed off the acorns off the driveway a while ago. Sitting here on the porch thinking. Had some great comments today on my most recent video about remembering games of old. And I'm sitting here on the porch reminiscing about some of the things I did as a child. So I thought I'd talk about that a little bit today. We're filming with the GoPro, so I'm going to prop my tail up here in the rocking chair. Thinking about some of the things I did as a child brings back memories of some things I did that weren't quite too safe to be doing. Far too many to mention here. But I'll try to discuss a few of them. Many of you may have did some things more on the same line as far as being dangerous. We never thought about danger back then as a youth. Nowadays, people have wised up and keep a very close eye on their kids. But we would roam as far as 10 miles from home when I was a kid. If something happened to us, it might be ages before they found us. I recall a couple of instances where serious things did happen to kids, and I won't even get into that. But I had some close calls myself. There's a pretty little Ford tractor on the low boy trailer pulled by a dually red pickup truck. I'd like to have that facility. Like I say, there was so many things we did that could have come to serious harm. Some of the little things like climbing as high as you can get in an oak tree. Sounds like fun, and it was. But you can also break your neck falling out of a tree 50 foot high. I recall, let's think back a little farther. I recall after I moved to Florida, around the age of, right at the age of 12, when I got down there, I learned how to swim. Did the pools and did the ocean and the beach plenty of times. And was quite proficient at swimming. But prior to that, I did not know how to swim. That's something that every parent should teach their kid, whether they think about it or not. There's no excuse for a person drowning. But it happens every day because people are scared of the water. The human being is quite capable of swimming like a fish for a minimum amount of time, at least enough time to get yourself to a safe location. I'm kind of roaming in this conversation. Brings to mind my youngest daughter. I threw her in the swimming pool we had here. She was about 5. Of course, I was right there watching after her. Her mother came home from work and had a fit. And that child was having a ball out there swimming. I had her little water wings on, her life jacket on. It wasn't long before she was jumping off the high dive on the very first day. Jumping off the diving board on the very first day. But you should teach your kids to swim. There's absolutely no excuse for drowning. Overcome your fear of the water and you won't drown. That's the biggest obstacle. But anyway, what I'm driving at, I recall, I guess I was about 7 or 8. We lived at that time in McCray, Georgia. And back behind the place where we lived, through some woods and across a big field, was a farm back there. Had a big cow pond, a farm pond. And it was, well, I guess it probably wasn't no deeper than 6 feet deep, his deepest point, but we didn't know. It was a huge pond. Well, we decided we wanted to build us a boat. And we took some roofing tin, this I remember roofing tin, some kind of metal, and bent it up like a canoe. We crimped the ends and beat them around. It was shaped sort of like a canoe. We sat out there and beat on that metal for a week with hammers, got it shaped up like a canoe, climbed in that canoe and pushed ourselves out in the middle of that pond. Well, we was having a good old time, had some pieces of wood for paddles and paddled out in the middle of the pond. We were a good couple 100 feet from the bank when that canoe tipped over and sunk. Next thing I know, I was in water up to here, on the verge of drowning. But I was able to hop on my tiptoes off the bottom of the pond and get my head above water. And I hopped, oh, I don't know, 40 or 50 feet before I got to water that was shallow enough to wade in and get my butt out of that pond. It scared the devil out of me, but I could have drowned it right there in that pond. I recall we played in the rivers and creeks a lot. We went down to, it was rainy season or something. There had been floods in the creeks and the water was up real high in the creek. It was running like 4 or 5 feet deep. And it was literally coming down through where we were. We were at a place where the creek crossed the road. And my 2 younger brothers, one was about 5, 4 maybe, and the other one was 1 year younger than me. Well, we were doing just fine out there playing along the edge of the water in a little sandy area, throwing rocks and having fun, playing in the wading in the water. And my youngest brother fell in that fast-moving water in the middle part of the creek. It was over his head, and he disappeared off downstream, screaming and hollering, getting washed downstream. And he wasn't going through the water slow. He was moving on. It was taking him like a rapids down through there. And I didn't know how to swim, but I knew I better not come home without my little brother. So I'm running along the side of that creek at a pretty good pace to overtake him. I got far enough ahead of him, and the banks were real steep at that area. There was like tree roots and vines and stuff hanging down in the water. I jumped in that water over my head, grabbed a handful of vines with this hand, and caught my little brother with the other hand and pulled him up out of the water and was able to wrestle us up out of the water. And there is something quite satisfying to realize you'd saved somebody's life. Because that was one time we didn't go home and tell Mama about it. We learned to stay away from the creek when the water was running deep. I pulled a little baby out of a swimming pool in Galley, Florida, from drowning. I guess I was about 13, 14, up on the high dive and jumped in the water and got him off the bottom of the pond. He had jumped in the deep end of the water and sunk to the bottom like a rock. No sooner did he reach the bottom, I was taking him back to the top. His mama was quite grateful that I got him out of the pond, out of the pool. Something quite satisfying about saving somebody's life. I'm kind of rambling now. Several times during my career, I could have done what you would consider saving someone's life. Quite a few times, actually. But that's getting off the subject. Some of the other dangerous things we did was just as bad. Go out in a swamp poking sticks at alligators down in Florida. friend of mine was, well, he wasn't a friend of mine, a kid in my school, in elementary school, was killed by alligators right there in O'Galley, Florida. Many of you have watched my rattlesnake story. If you haven't, you'll know that I'm deathly afraid of snakes from the encounters that I've had with them over the years. But I never went anywhere without my dog. Old Boots was her name, the most popular dog I had. The dog I remember the best was Boots. Boots was a half beagle and half dachshund. She was a fat little booger when she got a little older. But she went with me everywhere. That was one smart dog. I'm walking in a railroad ditch, ravine up the side of the railroad tracks, walking down through this real swampy, muddy area. One day, a dog was walking along with me nonchalantly, ignoring everything, when a snake over there in the bushes scurried in the grass and scared me, and I jumped and said, "Ah!" When I did, my dog turned her tail and run off and left me. All I could see was her hightailing it home. She ran all the way home. I got up out of the ditch and figured I better get away from all them snakes and went home. And she was sitting there on the back porch looking just as sheepish, like, "Yeah, I did. I ran off and left you. I'm glad you made it home." We did dumb things like climbing on the railroad trestle, playing on the tracks. Shooting at each other with BB guns. Shooting slingshots at each other, throwing rocks at each other. Imagine many of you have heard the story that a video I produced when I was 14, when I fell in a bog and sunk in mud up to here. How do I know I was 14? It was my 14th birthday and I got a whooping that day. Whooping? A whooping's when your daddy takes a belt or a strap and wears your ass out. Nowadays you call a law on you if you whip your kid. But I survived it somehow. And some of the whippings I got would have been considered child abuse by today's standards. But you didn't see kids going out and committing serious crimes like you do today. Kids nowadays have got no respect for the law whatsoever. They're running around the neighborhoods with guns, shooting each other, and joining gangs, and painting on people's walls, and what they call tagging. You can't even see a train going down a track what somebody ain't done. Spray painted the whole side of the train. How would you like it if somebody came over to your house and painted your automobile? You wouldn't think that was right to paint somebody's automobile, but yet everybody seems to condone painting private property like somebody's train. That train belongs to somebody. It has markings on it, measurements, ID numbers. They get all painted out, making things more difficult to identify. I'll have to get out here and dig me up some rabbit tobacco around the back of the property one day and show y'all what rabbit tobacco is. We used to take an old corn cob, cut off a section about that long, hollow it out with a pocket knife, put a reed in there, a hollow reed, pack that thing full of rabbit tobacco and smoke it. Rabbit tobacco smells very much like real tobacco. That was the first thing I ever smoked, and I smoked for 50 years. But I quit a couple years ago, and I seem to be getting by without it quite well. I still get an occasional urge for a cigarette. I love to get a whiff of one when somebody's near me. But by the same token, I can smell other smokers and know more of what they meant when a lot of people would complain about how I smell like cigarette smoke. I never noticed it when I was a smoker myself. Now I get within 10 or 15 feet of somebody that's been smoking, and I know right away. I can smell it on them. That's all I'm going to reminisce about today. We'll go into this subject in greater detail, and I think it's some more things to talk about. Thanks for listening, my friends.